Story 1. I was in my third and final year at university, studying archaeology. Due to recurring illness in my second year, I wasn't able to complete several core subjects and had to repeat them. One of those was an archaeological field school, which was held during the mid-year break. It was a hands-on course where we applied the techniques we'd already learned. This field school was mandatory for certain subjects, but not everyone in the program needed to take it. I had completed the previous year's field school, but because I couldn't finish the associated courses, I had to do both again. This university has multiple campuses, and the field school was only offered at two of them, the main campus and a sister campus even farther north. The field school was held near the main campus, so everyone had to travel to attend. For some, it was just a short drive, but for others, like those from the sister campus, it was a longer and more expensive trip. My lecturer, let's call him Matt, was amazing. He was a brilliant teacher, had written 2 books, and was still working in his field. He was easygoing and friendly, and we'd often share a drink together. I had only seen him get angry once, and that's important later in the story. The grading system at our university went like this. High distinction, 85 to 100%. Distinction, 75 to 84%. Credit, 65 to 74%. Pass, 50 to 64%. Conceded pass, 48 to 49%. Fail, below 50%. Now, Matt had gotten permission to run this year's field school near a historic cemetery. The gully near the cemetery had been used as a trash dump, and we were going to excavate parts of it. Since space was limited, each group was assigned a dig site upon arrival. I had spoken with Matt beforehand because I didn't have a car and knew I'd be late on some days. He was fine with it and said I wouldn't be penalized, but I'd likely be placed in a group to make up the numbers rather than choosing one myself. Friday arrived, and I got there about half an hour late. Matt introduced me to my group, which consisted of myself and 3 geology students from the sister campus. There was Gaza, an older guy who seemed annoyed he'd been put in a group with younger students. Baza, a young geology student clearly aiming for a mining career. And Daza, who was Baza's good friend and also heading for the mining industry. Matt told them I had experience from last year, so they should use my knowledge. Things went smoothly at first, but it didn't take long for Baza and Daza to get bored. Archaeology isn't exactly like the movies, it's slow, repetitive, and requires a lot of documentation. We had to measure and photograph everything, test soil samples, and record every small detail. Gaza was fine with this, and we got along well. But Baza and Daza, they lost interest quickly and had to be repeatedly called back to help. Saturday morning, I arrived an hour late, as expected. When I greeted Matt, though, something was clearly wrong. He was furious, pacing around with clenched fists. Me, morning, Matt, everything okay? Matt, just get to your group and get to work. His response caught me off guard. I apologized for being late, but he assured me it wasn't about that. He just couldn't deal with whatever was happening at that moment. I went over to our dig site and nearly burst into tears. Our pit, which had been just 30 centimeters deep the day before, was now a massive hole about 3 meters deep. Piles of dirt were scattered everywhere, and several objects had been dug up and left out in the open. Other groups were staring but trying to act like they weren't. Gaza looked ready to explode. Baza and Daza were pale and looked like they were going to be sick. I asked what had happened, and the truth came out. The night before, Baza and Daza, along with another student named Keza, had gotten drunk. They decided it would be a great idea to break into the cemetery and continue digging our pit. They dug until one of them passed out at the bottom of the hole, in loose, sandy soil. They were lucky the whole thing didn't collapse on them. Matt had been called to the site at 3 a.m. by the police, who had been alerted by a local resident. Baza, Daza, and Keza were told that after field school ended, they were done kicked out of the archaeological program. Gaza was able to join another group, but I was left to deal with the mess they'd created. I spent the day documenting the chaos while Baza and Daza took photos of the hundreds of items they'd unearthed. They had to use a miniature whiteboard and scale measurements for each item, and it kept them busy and out of my way. By the end of the day, I'd filled the pit back in, wishing I could leave them at the bottom. Later on, I was allowed to join another group in an observational role, but the damage was done. I barely had any data for the semester's final report, which was supposed to be based on our fieldwork. For my final project, Matt agreed to let me write a field school critique instead of a standard report. I used the photos Baza and Daza had taken, even though many of them had inappropriate comments written on the whiteboard. Their juvenile behavior was on full display, with slurs and offensive messages aimed at me. I included everything in my report. In the end, Matt presented my report to the university's administration. Baza and Daza weren't just expelled from archaeology, they were booted from the geology program too. They were blacklisted from the university and would face immense difficulties enrolling anywhere else. Although the experience soured me on archaeology, I finished my degree with a focus on English and history. After a gap year, I went back to get a postgraduate diploma in secondary education. Story 2. I'll start by saying this was a bit petty, but honestly, it still makes me chuckle when I think about it. For context, Neverwinter Nights 2 is a Dungeons & Dragons MMORPG where players can add their own content and run their own servers. At the time, I was playing on a server, I can't remember the name now, that had a token system. Every boss dropped 4 tokens, and these would be randomly divided among the party members. The server also had its own guilds and several dungeon masters DMs who oversaw everything. I had a new character and was trying to level up, but I kept getting my low-level gear stolen or was outright killed while grinding by a particular guild. This was frustrating because, as a low-level character, I didn't have much to steal, and every time I died, I lost some gold and gear, which I then had to go back and retrieve. I messaged a DM to complain about the situation, thinking they'd help. Instead, I was told that this behavior was allowed and that I needed to stop complaining. I tried to explain that I had nothing valuable and was just trying to play the game, but the DM told me if I complained again, I'd be banned. Later, I found out that the DM I messaged was actually the leader of the guild harassing me. So, not much I could do at that point. A few friends and I started playing together for safety in numbers. After a while, I discovered a glitch, specifically, a duplication glitch. This glitch allowed me to turn my 3 tokens into 30, then into 300, and so on. By this time, we'd been playing for a few months, and I figured, why not take advantage? So, I duplicated a bunch of tokens, and we fought our way to the armory to buy some mythical gear. We got fully geared up, feeling invincible, and went out adventuring. It was finally fun again. We even started giving high-level gear to our friends and building a massive adventuring party of well-equipped players. Of course, this didn't go unnoticed. Some people, especially in that guild, started getting mad about how much gear I had. And being the sane and rational person I was, I decided to remember how they had burned me earlier. I went full throttle, churning out full sets of the highest level gear and giving them away to new players. I made millions of gold and just left it lying around. Super high-level gear. I left that lying around too, for anyone to pick up. This went on all weekend. By the end of it, about 70% of the server's players were running around in the best gear. I had effectively destroyed the server's economy, making legendary weapons and shields as common as pebbles. Monday rolled around, and I went to work like usual. When I got home and logged back into the game, I was immediately placed in an in-game prison with a DM, this time a different one. This DM was furious. "DM, what did you do?" I casually explained that I was just getting my revenge. The DMs had no idea how I managed to pull off what I did, and they were practically begging me to tell them so they could fix the glitch in their system. This was my bargaining moment. I'll tell you everything but on one condition. The DM, who is the leader of that guild, he's banned. And the player who kept griefing me when I started, permanently banned. Then, I'll take my own ban too. They gave in. The DM who had ignored my complaints was banned temporarily and removed from the guild. The player who had harassed me was banned permanently. The guild, now without its leader, fell apart and disbanded. When the DM returned to the game, he had to start over from scratch. It felt good then, and honestly, it still feels pretty good now. Story 3. I've been babysitting 2 little girls, ages 3 and 5, for over a year now. I've known their parents since I was a kid. I'm 21 now, and we've always gotten along really well. About a month ago, I decided to dye my hair a reddish-brown color. When I showed up for babysitting, the girls loved it. Their parents are pretty relaxed about the girls playing with makeup and fashion, so it wasn't a big deal. When I finished babysitting that day, I asked their mom if it would be okay to bring some fun fashion stuff next time, and she thought it was a great idea. The next time I went over was last week. I brought along a beauty case filled with necklaces, costumes, hair ties, makeup, some frozen perfume, and of course pink hair dye. I asked both parents if it would be okay to dye the girls' hair pink since it's their favorite color. I made sure to explain that it was a temporary dye designed for kids and would wash out easily. They laughed and said it was fine, but they specifically asked me to give the girls a bath without washing their hair, probably so they could see it the next morning. They said their goodbyes, and off they went, leaving me with the kids. They also mentioned that their grandma, let's call her Grandma Karen, would be home around midnight to pay me. So, we had a great time. We played fashionistas, tried on costumes, and even gave them pink hair makeovers. Around 9 p.m., I was getting the girls ready for bed, putting them in their bathrobes and night diapers, when the doorbell rang. It was Grandma Karen, 3 hours earlier than expected. Without even saying hello, she barged in, almost knocking me over, and started pulling out a 50-euro bill from her purse. But the moment she saw the girls' pink hair, she lost her mind. "Grandma Karen, what in the name of Jesus and Mary have you done to my babies?" Me, "Oh, don't worry, we were just playing dress up. The dye is temporary and can be washed too." She rushed to the girls, screaming hysterically. "Grandma Karen, what did she do to your beautiful golden hair?" Me, "Ma'am, it's okay. Their mom and dad know a boo." "Grandma Karen, shut up. Who do you think you are to come here and assault my babies?" Then she went off on me for several minutes. "Grandma Karen, this is child abuse. I'm calling the police. You child molester." At this point, I started freaking out. I knew I hadn't done anything wrong, but the idea of being questioned by the police terrified me. She basically held me hostage in the living room, continuing her rant. She even crumpled the 50-euro bill and shoved it back into her pocket. The insults kept coming. "Grandma Karen, I can't believe their mother would hire someone like you. You probably have a criminal record, don't you? I hope you rot in prison for 20 years, you." Insert racial slur. She kept going on and on, saying I had ruined her granddaughters' lives, traumatized them, and that this was child abuse. She even accused me of cutting their hair, which I hadn't, and implied that I had been hurting them for months. It was unbelievable. Now, imagine the most entitled Karen, double her age, shorten her hair, and crank up the craziness. That's what I had to deal with for almost half an hour. At one point, she even said that my own hair color, which she compared to something inappropriate, was a bad influence on the kids. Thankfully, I managed to text the parents during her rant. They arrived shortly after the police, and a Child Protective Services officer showed up. The whole situation was insane, but the officers couldn't leave until the parents arrived to verify that everything was okay. The girls' parents were furious when they saw what had happened. They apologized profusely, and Grandma Karen didn't let me put the girls to bed, so everything happened in front of them. Not only did she verbally attack me in the worst way I've ever experienced, but she also ruined their parents' date night. When I finally left, I broke down crying, but at least I got paid double that night. And honestly, the girls' pink hair looked fabulous. Now, here's the kicker. Since Grandma Karen lied about me assaulting the girls and verbally attacked me, the police officer gave me his number and said I could press charges if I wanted to. I'm seriously considering it, but I love the parents, and I don't want this to hurt them. Update. Since the pandemic started, I haven't seen the family as much, but I've been babysitting again in the past few weeks. Grandma Karen was actually at the house one day when I went over, and she gave me some nasty death stares. That was the final straw, so I called the officer and went to the police station. I made the decision. I went to the station with the parents after speaking with the officer again. He explained the possible outcomes to me. I had 3 options: 1, press charges; 2, let it go; or 3, file a formal warning. I wasn't going to just let it go after everything she put me through, but I also didn't choose to press full charges. Before anyone criticizes me for not going all the way, let me explain why. The officer told me that since Grandma Karen's record was mostly clean aside from some minor traffic violations, the best I could hope for would be a small fine for psychological damages. But since she doesn't have that kind of money, it would have ended up coming from the parents, and I didn't want that. The formal warning, however, meant the police would visit her and let her know that a complaint had been filed. All the racist slurs, threats, and everything else would go on her record under an official warning. If anyone else ever presses charges against her for something similar, that warning would make her case much worse, possibly even leading to a prison sentence. That's what I wanted. The parents fully supported this decision. Now, I'm letting karma do its thing. Given how entitled she is, I'm sure it's only a matter of time before she gets into it with some retail worker over wearing a mask and boom, arrested. If that happens, I'll definitely post another update. Oh, and by the way, the girls just started school with blue highlights this time. Story 4. I used to work as security for a popular phone company in Dublin city centre. It was the flagship store, so it got very busy. One customer, though, stood out: a guy named Mark. And trust me, he lived up to the title of an entitled customer. He was rude, obnoxious, and ignorant. One day, Mark walks in when there's a line of about 6 people, but instead of waiting, he just strolls right past them. I call out to him and tell him to join the queue like everyone else, but he dismisses me, saying he's too busy and needs to speak with someone immediately. I'm about to approach him when the manager, who's standing nearby, gives me a reassuring nod. He's got this. Mark heads straight for the manager, who's clearly busy with paperwork, and the manager tells him he'll have to wait. Now, it's important to note that it's Ramadan, and the manager is fasting, so he's not in the best mood. You can tell he's hungry, and the smell of food wafting from the break room upstairs doesn't help. I have a feeling things are about to get heated. I wait nearby, keeping an eye on the rest of the shop, but I'm also watching the interaction between Mark and the manager. After about 10 minutes, the manager puts down his pen, closes the logbook he's working on, takes a deep breath, and looks up with a forced smile. Mark steps forward, thinking it's his turn, but the manager raises a hand to stop him. "Manager, not you. I'll serve the ones in the queue first." Mark, with a serious side eye at me, mutters, "Fine." By this time, the queue had grown to more than 15 people. I had to step away from that part of the shop to keep an eye on everything else. Mark looks at me again, and I remind him, politely, to join the queue. "Mark, no. I'm okay." "Fine then, wait outside the queue." Every time the manager finishes with a customer, Mark takes a step forward, only to be waved away. The manager keeps alternating between serving customers and telling Mark to wait. Now, Mark refuses to go to the other staff member, because, in the past, she had made a complete show of him in public. Mark had a bit of a reputation as a creep, and she wasn't having any of it. He knew better than to approach her. So Mark just stands there, and waits, and waits. Every time someone new joins the queue, he sighs loudly, grumbling to himself whenever the manager tells him to wait longer. 40 minutes pass, and the queue finally dwindles down to just one person. The manager steps away to grab a glass of water, leaving me, Mark, the other staff member, and the last customer in the store. There's also another guy on the floor, but he's not handling the sales, so he's irrelevant at this point. Mark is fuming. His face has turned bright red, and he's clenching his fists. I casually walk over and stand nearby, knowing he won't dare say anything to me. He just stands there, quietly boiling in rage, while the staff members smirk at his frustration. The last customer leaves, and Mark storms up to the remaining staff member, who looks at him and bluntly says, "What?" This staff member is a great worker, but she has zero patience for people like Mark. She lets him rant about some vague issue, standing there for about 5 minutes while he babbles on. He knows better than to insult her directly, but he toes the line. When he finally stops, she looks him dead in the eye and says, "Staff, that's a contract issue. You'll have to ring the call center." Now, technically, she could have helped him, but she didn't have to, and she wasn't about to. Mark gets even angrier. He demands to see the manager. Another staff member, the one working the floor, slowly heads upstairs to fetch the manager. He takes his sweet time, though, and when he comes back, he's holding a cup of tea for himself and the other staff member. He sits down and casually says, "Floor staff, the manager's on lunch." Cue a string of insults and slurs from Mark. That's when I step in. "Me, you need to leave." Mark, in a fit of rage, squares up to me, but the guy barely reaches my chest. It took everything in me not to laugh as I saw the staff giggling behind the counter. Mark, realizing he's not intimidating anyone, slinks out of the store in defeat. And that was the last we saw of him for a while. Story 5. This happened just yesterday. I'm staying at a mountain resort in a 5-star hotel, and there's a beautiful spa with an amazing view of the mountains. Since it's holiday season, the place is packed with guests. Recently, I bought myself a pair of Brunello Cucinelli slippers, which I now use for spa visits. During one of my visits, a guest walked off with my slippers while I was in the jacuzzi. It took me a few minutes to realize they were gone. I asked a nearby staff member if they had seen my slippers, and they told me that someone had indeed walked away wearing them. At first, I thought it might have been an honest mistake, but then I noticed there were no other slippers around. Since there were only 2 of us in the jacuzzi at the time, it seemed unlikely that someone who arrived without slippers would suddenly take mine and leave. The staff member asked me to wait for a few minutes while they looked into the situation. A little later, they came back to inform me that they had checked the spa's cameras and found out that the guest who took my slippers was staying in the presidential suite. I didn't want to make a big scene, so when I bumped into the person later still wearing my slippers, I politely pointed out that they might have taken mine by mistake. The response I got was unbelievable. The guest said, "Why do you care so much, greedy guy? They don't even fit you, and you don't deserve them anyway." I was completely taken aback and responded with a very angry, "Excuse me," the kind of tone you use when you're just about to lose it. Without another word, the guest tossed the slippers off and rushed away, right in front of several staff members and other guests. Later that evening, the hotel manager found me for a friendly chat. He explained that incidents like this, unfortunately, happen quite often, though they don't usually involve anything particularly valuable. Just the day before, a grown woman had stolen a large ice cream dessert that was brought for a teenage girl while she was in the sauna. The dessert was worth less than $15. What's especially mind-boggling is that no one staying at this hotel could be considered poor. During the peak seasons, like winter and summer, even a standard room costs more than $500 per night. The presidential suite is over $5,000. And yet, despite the wealth of the guests, there are still people with the entitlement to steal, even something as trivial as slippers, right in front of staff and cameras. Story 6. About 10 years ago, I was in the process of switching jobs after spending over 7 years at my previous one. I had grown tired of working with printers and similar equipment and wanted to explore something new. I found a company that dealt with CCTV, security, and fire alarms. This company had several branches across major cities in my country. Although the pay was lower than my previous job, I was eager for a change, so I decided to go for it. I was hired under a 3-month trial contract, which is common practice in my country. This type of contract offers the same terms as a regular employment contract, but often limits certain benefits like healthcare or gym passes. After the trial period, we would decide if I'd stay on permanently. My boss was the regional manager RM, and I had a coworker who had joined before me. At that point, the branch had only been open for a few months. It's important to note that this company exclusively operated in business-to-business B2B sales, no retail customers. We didn't even have a fiscal printer, which is mandatory for retail sales. Our clients were all companies, ranging from big to small, and per company policy, they had to specialize in electrical equipment installation to qualify for certain pricing levels. The company used a customer relationship management CRM software, where we were required to log every interaction with our clients. When I asked my RM for guidance on how detailed the entries should be, the following conversation took place. Me, so I need to log just the sales, or should I include other interactions as well? RM, everything. Each call, each visit, each sale. You also need to schedule follow-up calls or visits. You're required to contact each client at least once a week to maintain the relationship and note everything in the CRM. It's connected to the phone system, so we know if the calls are made or not. Me, you realize calling that often might annoy some clients, right? RM, this is company policy. We want our clients to feel cared for, and it's your job to make sure they do. We all know this is not how you build positive relationships with potential clients. Nobody enjoys constant calls from banks or phone companies offering another great deal, but fine, it wasn't my place to argue with company policy. I split the client list with my coworker, found a few new contacts online, and began my weekly calls. Initially, I introduced myself as their new sales representative and asked if it was okay to check in with them occasionally. Of course, I didn't mention I'd be calling every week. After a few rounds of calls, some clients stopped answering altogether. Others blocked me. You know it's happening when calls go straight to voicemail, and some voiced their frustration with very colorful language. One client even told me to kindly take a journey to the land of unpleasant sensations. I noted every call in the CRM as instructed, though I avoided quoting the insults verbatim. Instead, I'd write, "Client unhappy with frequent contact. Next call scheduled for DD/MIM/YI, always for the following week." As expected, this approach didn't win us any favors with the clients. Because we managed to alienate most of them, our sales were lackluster, so we were not allowed to keep much inventory in stock at our local branch. This meant that when a client did visit, the shelves were practically empty. For example, if a client wanted to set up a basic CCTV system, we might only have one DVR, 2 cameras, and a single hard drive in stock. Resupply shipments came twice a week, so if someone ordered on a Thursday, the earliest they'd receive it would be Tuesday afternoon. Unsurprisingly, this led to canceled orders, as clients often couldn't wait that long. About 7 or 8 weeks into my job, I made my routine call to one client, whom I'll call Red. I was just about to hang up after getting no answer when Red picked up and immediately started yelling. "Red, are you serious?" I nearly fell off the ladder thinking it was an important call. "And it's you again? Didn't I tell you not to bother me? Are you stupid?" He went on, hurling creative insults for a while. When he finally paused, I gave my usual response. "Me, I'm sorry you find the calls annoying, but it's company policy to keep in close contact with our top clients." By the way, Red had never actually bought anything from us. "Red, I don't care about your company's policy. Give me your supervisor's number." Me, "Yes, sir." I gladly gave him my RM's name, title, and phone number. He paused for a moment, probably writing it down, and then hung up without another word. I dutifully logged the conversation in the CRM, noting, "Client angry, requested supervisor contact, complied." About half an hour later, my RM called me. "RM, did you call Red today?" Me, "I did, as per the weekly requirement." RM, "Okay, don't call him again." I'm guessing Red had quite the conversation with my boss about the company's policy. The following week, one of the few clients who didn't mind my calls walked into the store and asked, "I hear you're closing up shop?" My coworker and I exchanged confused looks and asked where he heard that. He answered vaguely, saying, "It's just what people are saying." We assured him we didn't know anything about it, took his order which we didn't have in stock, of course, and he left. When I tried to place the order, I got a call from the warehouse. "Warehouse? Hi, you placed an order for X and Y." Me, I did. "Is there a problem?" Warehouse, "Yeah, kind of. All your deliveries are on hold, so we can't ship anything to you." That's when it clicked. I thanked them for the info, hung up, and shared the news with my coworker. She called the RM, who claimed it must be some kind of mistake, and told us not to worry. That Friday, the RM showed up at 9 and we opened at 8 o'clock and got straight to the point. "RM, here are your papers. You're relieved from work as of Monday. Today, we'll pack up all the stock and equipment. A truck will arrive at 2 p.m. to collect everything, and the store is closing." Being relieved from work meant we were still technically employed, receiving pay and benefits, but we didn't have to come in. My trial period had 2 weeks left, so I got paid for that time without having to work. My coworker had a 2-week notice period as well. I later updated my LinkedIn to reflect my brief time at the company as branch closing specialist. It seemed more accurate than the technical and sales specialist title I had on my contract. The company is still around, but has since scaled back its branches and, as far as I know, loosened its strict policies a bit. After that, I switched industries again, moving to cable TV, but eventually found my way back to CCTV and security for another company, where I stayed for 4 years. I built great relationships with clients there, and, thankfully, never called any of them without a good reason. Story 7. Today, my sister hit me across the face, and it all started over an argument about an Uber. This morning, my sister and I woke up late for school. We're both high school students, and since we missed the bus, we needed to get an Uber. I don't have a job, but she does, so naturally, I asked if we could split the cost of the Uber. That's when she got mad. Yesterday, I had paid for the Uber, and the day before that, we split the cost. The reason she was upset is that she had already paid for our Uber a few times in the past. Back when I was in middle school and she was in high school, I would always get up on time, but sometimes she would still be at home when I woke up, taking her time to get ready. Sometimes she'd spend an hour in the shower, making us late. Once I started high school, she made us late almost every day, even though I was always ready on time. So she would have to call an Uber, or I'd have no choice but to tell our mom. Keep in mind, I still don't have a job. This morning, she told me to wake up late because she wasn't going to be ready. For context, I'm staying with my aunt right now. You can read more about that in my previous posts. I was already annoyed when she said no to splitting the cost of the Uber because the past few days had been really stressful. She was also insulting the way I cook and making messes everywhere that I had to clean. She could tell I was angry, but I still ordered the Uber with the little money I have. I told her when it would arrive. Still upset, I walked past her, and out of nowhere, she hit me across the face with something hard. I don't even know what it was. I started crying because I was already stressed and upset. I yelled at her, asking why she hit me. My aunt heard us and asked what had happened, so I told her and also informed my mom. I wanted to go stay with my mom after school because I didn't want to see my sister anymore. I rushed out the door when the Uber arrived because I didn't want to stay there any longer, but I accidentally left my water bottle behind. My sister came to school later, and she knows what class I'm in. She came and handed me my water bottle like nothing had happened, even laughing about it. I was really confused. Then, she ignored me for the rest of the day. When I got on the bus after school, she didn't ride with me. A few hours later, when I got back to the house, I found out that she had packed up all her things and left. She got kicked out for not cleaning up after herself and, of course, for hitting me. That was the last straw. I feel guilty because I never thought she'd actually get kicked out. Sure, she hits me and scares me sometimes, but she's still my sister. Even though it's hard, I feel like I'm supposed to help and love her. Small edit. I'm not allowed to get on the bus by myself in the mornings because it's dangerous where I live, and my parents worry that I might have an anxiety attack while walking. Sometimes I do manage to go to school by myself, and my mom takes me even if I'm late. Despite everything, I still get my work done and I'm passing my classes. I'm also in honors classes. I've been trying to attend after-school tutoring, but my anxiety makes it difficult. I did manage to go last Thursday, even though I signed up 2 weeks before.